Hello. I am here with Catherine Ralph, aka Kat. We're talking about mental health and LGBTQ identities. She's going to share her story, her journey with coming out, her struggles with mental health and just the outside world and bullying, just everything that she's gone through. Hoping that it will help someone maybe that's going through the same thing, and just what she's done with coping or helping herself get through it and all that good stuff. So I'm going to introduce Kat.
Hey y'all, how's it going? Thanks for watching. So I'm Kat. Molly and I have known each other since we were
You were 10.
I was 10, so...
And I was 12.
That's 20 years.
Yeah, we used to skate.
Damn.
Oh, yeah. Man, I'm old. We grew up at a skating rink in Denton. She speed skated and didn't stop skating. I tried to talk her into playing derby for a long time, but she ignored me, so...
No health insurance.
But she goes to school... And that's really good, which you can talk about, what you're going to school for, what your plan is. But let's start with when you knew that you were gay and how you came out and just everything that's followed that.
Yeah, for sure. So I came out when I was 19. I think I definitely had some inkling before that, but I never really felt comfortable talking about it until I was 19. And that was for my queer or lesbian identity. I think gender-wise, I always knew something was off. And I think that started when I was 4 or 5. My parents asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I said a boy.
I remember you telling me that story.
They were like, that's not what we meant. But yeah, so definitely there are kind of two main areas to my identity. Do you want me to look at you or do you want me to look at the camera?
You do whatever you want.
Okay. And one of those is sexuality and one of those is gender. And so they sometimes interact, but for the most part, they're separate for me.
Which I think a lot of people don't understand that. Yeah. And society is just now getting used to it, but yeah. I feel like there are some people that really don't understand the difference and why people want to be referred to as a different pronoun. And so I really love that we're educating people about this and what you feel and how just the people have viewed it and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I think it's different for everyone too. I mean, it's hearing individual stories, I think, that really make the impact, because you can't just lump people into groups. And so I can say I'm queer and that might mean one thing for me, but it could mean something different for somebody else. I identify as non-binary and that means something for me that could mean something very different for someone else. So yeah, I think my gender identity and my sexuality are two very different things, but they happen to kind of overlap sometimes, and society views them as one. So you kind of have to combat that. But I think coming out for me was significantly easier than it was for most people. I didn't really lose any friends. I didn't lose.
You have a very supportive family.
Yeah.
Hi, Ellen.
I do. Hey, Mom. So yeah, everyone kind of coming out as queer, coming out as a lesbian at the time, everyone kind of knew already, I think.
Yeah.
And I was the last to know.
Yeah, because I remember when you came out, I was like, finally. I mean, I think we all kind of knew. You were a big tomboy. I was a tomboy, but you just never grew out of that phase.
Right, which so if you think about that statement, right,
yeah.
We're associating my gender expression with my sexuality, which we do in society. Yeah. And sometimes, and a lot of times, that's a fair statement, right? And for me, it definitely, I'm queer and I'm non-binary, but just because you were a tomboy doesn't mean you were going to be a lesbian, right?
Right.
You know,
right.
So I
Because I had an older brother and I wanted to be just like him. I mean,
right.
I went through this phase where I wanted to wear boxers. Like that was my choice of underwear. Super uncomfortable, but I wanted to be so cool. Like, hey, look at me.
You were the coolest.
Were, not is, no.
Yeah.
So, tell me about a couple of, just like bullying instances. Like I know that before we came on live, you had said that you had an experience when you were going to get your hair cut.
Yeah, so I haven't really talked about this publicly or privately really much for the sake of a friend. And so I'm just going to leave it kind of vague in terms of, where it was. But
sure.
Yeah, so I've dealt with bullying basically my whole life. Before I even came out, I was being bullied for being gay. And, it doesn't stop. I'm 30 years old and this happened maybe a month ago. And month and a half ago, I was getting my, this kind of coincides with two things we were talking about earlier. I was getting my hair cut and, the older gay man in the salon who works there was teasing two of his female employees, or maybe even three of them, about which one would be the bitchiest pregnant. And my hairdresser was washing my hair and I turned and I said, I'd be careful what you say. That's workplace harassment.
Yeah.
And I know this person, this gentleman, and so I know his kind of, the way that he functions. He's he jokes a lot.
Yeah.
He does a lot of teasing down. And so I said it in such a way where it could be received by him, but also kind of let him know, like, this is inappropriate.
Right.
And I'm not happy
well,
about it.
especially in a professional setting when you have people there, like, you shouldn't be talking about that. And that's something that bothers me just across the board is people just say stuff because they think it's okay.
And they think it's funny.
Yeah.
And so I said a few things, and I said, would you do this to your male employees? And, there were other people there. There were other clients there. And he said he's got really upset and started going off on me. And of course the water's running, and so you can only hear so much. And at one point he goes, "Can I cuss?"
Yeah, you can do whatever you want.
He said, "I'm so fucking tired of women." And at this point, I knew it was getting more intense than I had initially thought it would.
It's like you struck a nerve, like,
right.
Just
and I hit him where it hurt. And I didn't respond. And then he goes, "Oh, but wait, I can't even go that far with you because you chopped him off."
So how close, not that it matters, but how close of a friend, like, is it just someone you know? Is he more than...
A friend of a friend.
Okay.
And I've socially engaged with him a couple times.
Okay.
And we tease each other when I'm in the salon in a fun,
but
loving,
not taking it too far.
The tone was different.
Body language.
There were other people in this environment.
So for a second, I'm going to pause you. I want you to elaborate on what he means. So
almost 2 years ago, May 11th, I had top surgery, which is a double mastectomy. Some people call it gender affirming surgery, but I removed both of my breasts because they caused me a lot of gender dysphoria, which for me was just extreme discomfort. It's not that for me, it's my gender. It's not that I want to be a man. I don't want to be a man. It's that I don't believe that there are just two options.
Right.
And so for me, the physical aspect of having breasts was just really uncomfortable and kind of further than that, just not just disturbing, but it was really emotionally taxing for me to see my body that way. And I remember in high school even looking in the mirror and being like, maybe they're just not big enough, you know? Yeah. And now I laugh because I'm like, no, they were there in the first place, you know? And so it's just something that I've always felt was wrong about, you know, my body. And so I had top surgery 2 years ago, my 11th, and I've been very open and public about that, and so he knows that via social media, and obviously has some feelings about that. And so when he said that, it was very
it's like pointed. You felt like you were being attacked.
Yeah, it was very pointed, very intentional. He was trying to hurt me, and boy did he. I mean, I immediately started crying, and it was just, it was so shocking to me that somebody within the community too, this is a gay man I'm talking about, you know, would intentionally try to hurt me, someone that, you know, for all practical purpose could be considered a friend, you know?
Right.
So that was really hard. I mean, I remember I cried it was a thing, and I went home and cried some more, and I think I was in bed for like 2 days. It was pretty.
That's so
awful.
hard, and I think that people don't realize when they're saying things like that how it affects someone. And you hear about kids, like the suicide rate. I just saw this on the news today. There was a college kid, the valedictorian, that was doing his commencement speech, and he came out, and some of his relatives didn't even know he was gay. Wow. And I believe it was in Utah. It was a it was a school that I want to say was a Catholic school. It was somewhere where you would not expect it.
Right.
And he had his speech approved, and they approved it. So it wasn't like he was, you know, just doing
dropping a bomb.
Yeah. And I thought it was so awesome. And he was doing it not for himself, but for other kids, because kids that are bisexual or homosexual or whatever the case is, you know, they have I think it's like a four times.
It's almost 5 times
the rate of suicide. And for like instance, you could have been in there having a really bad day, and then on top of that, someone saying that. And this kind of goes back to the last Facebook Live I did. Like, you don't know what people are going through, so don't assume and don't think it's okay, because that could push someone over the edge because you're already feeling uncomfortable. And, you know, good for you for taking the steps and being okay with bullying. I mean, you're not okay with it, but you are, you know, fighting society ultimately, and you're making yourself be comfortable in your own skin, which people in general, it's a tough thing to go through. And then that he says that, like, it's just so hard.
Yeah, it was awful. And I know had I been in a different space in my life, it would have impacted me, because I'm emotionally and mentally, I'm in a really positive space in my life, and that's due to counseling, that's due to medication, that's due to my own coping mechanisms. And imagine if I had not been in that space, I mean, what that could have done, that would have crippled me, you know. And I don't like to use that word, and I apologize for using that word, but it would have put me under for a long time. And luckily I was able to recoup in a matter of, 24 hours. But
how soon after that did you see your therapist?
It was like a week later. Okay. I've been going since I've been in grad school, I've been going pretty often. So luckily I was able to see my counselor within a week. And I've been going through some stuff at school too that is relating to that, like, transphobia and homophobia in the classroom, and stuff like that. And so it was already kind of a topic of discussion. And so it's almost like a bad joke, so you see your counselor one week and you're talking about these awful instances, and I've had to go through the Office of Disability Accommodations and get some services because of mental illness, because of panic attacks. And then, just a couple days later, I'm in this,
what you think is a safe space.
Yeah, for sure. And this happens, and, it's like a bad joke. Luckily, I have coping mechanisms. Luckily, I am medicated the way I need to be, and I do have a counselor, and,
you're doing all the things that are necessary.
That for me, and that I've learned in the 30 years that I've been alive, I have to do in order to be okay. And, and so I was able to kind of recover from that. But man, it's not easy. That's for sure.
Yeah. And, you think it's 2019 and you're in grad school where they're mainly adults and just to hear that you have, homophobic classmates that make you feel uncomfortable, make you go into panic attacks. Like, that's so crazy. And
to think I'm in the social work field, like should be leading the advocacy and activist efforts to combat homophobia and to combat transphobia. And it's those very people that are, guilty of these microaggressions and guilty of the homophobia and the transphobia.
Which makes it even harder.
It does. It really does. And because I went in and, in my bachelor's level was a totally different experience. Everyone was maybe they weren't educated, but they were humble and they wanted to be. And so I went into this program with the same kind of thinking that was going to be the case, and quickly realized that these people were not the same. They were not educated, and maybe they didn't care to be. And even some of my professors have been transphobic and homophobic. And some of the people that have come in the classroom, the Council on Social Work Education, not intentionally, but misgendering me and calling me sir, and it's those little things that add up that send you into a panic attack. And you can't control that. That's not something, and I hadn't had panic attacks really until this past semester. And it's something, if you need medical proof, go find someone having a panic attack and take their blood pressure.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. When I saw my blood pressure after my first panic attack at school, I was like, oh, this is like...
It's a real thing.
Real life cannot control this is happening right now. And so, now that's another added issue on top of other, depression and anxiety that I am now dealing with.
Well, and going back to like the pronouns and people calling you sir. So we had talked about this also before we went live. Now, I think a lot of people, and myself included, it's very hard it's like you don't know who uses what pronoun.
Right.
And I had mentioned that Joel had asked me, like, does she go by she or is it they? And I was like, you know what? I think it's she, but I shouldn't assume.
Yeah.
So I want you to talk about, and from your perspective, on what pronoun you like to use, what you're going to do, and kind of why.
Yeah. So when I first came out as non-binary and decided I was going to do top surgery, one of the things that came up is, because that kind of falls under the trans umbrella, so I identify as transgender as well. I use non-binary because it's more pointed, it's more in line with my identity, but I do also use trans. And so one of the big questions is, well, what pronouns are you going to use?
Yeah.
And for me, none of them fit. Like she, her, and hers.
It's like you are who you are.
Right, Kat. Yeah. I remember there's this story I tell sometimes, and there was this musician at my parents' restaurant, and he was sitting outside, and I was sitting there talking to him, and I got up and left and went inside, and somebody said, was that person trans? And this was before I come out or anything as non-binary, before I had top surgery, and the musician said, that's Kat. And I, and he was just, I don't know his intention. I don't know what he was thinking, but I was like, that's kind of how I feel. Like, I'm just Kat, and I that can't be defined by a gender. Like my identity can't be defined by my gender. And so, as far as pronouns go, like none of them really fit. Mm-hmm. So I decided to stay with she, her, hers, because that's what people know. And if nothing else feels
and you don't think
better,
too much into it. You're just like, whatever.
Right, whatever.
Yeah.
Now, some people really do need to switch their pronouns, and it's just like being called she sends them into this, again, like a panic. And so that's very real for some people. And even being misgendered the other direction, being called he, sends me that way. So that shows you, I've directly had a panic attack relating to being misgendered. And so it shows you how important they are, and it's not something that I can really explain.
Right.
It's just this feeling that you're not seen, that you don't exist.
Yeah.
And because somebody's making this just general assumption about you by the way you look. So for me, pronouns have never really been something that I felt the need to change or really put much effort into, because again, it was just like none of it really fits.
Yeah.
But recently, I'm planning to move and kind of start a new chapter of my life, and I've been thinking about using they, them, theirs pronouns. So part of my background, I'm in social work, and I do a lot of LGBTQ trainings, and so I train people on how to use pronouns, when to use pronouns, when to ask somebody their pronouns, when do you introduce yourself with your so I train on this all the time, and so it's something that's in my mind, like, well, how do I feel now? Would I want to use these pronouns? You know, and so now that I've been really actively doing these trainings at my internship, it's come up a lot, and I think that they, them, theirs, I think it will feel better than she, her, hers. And so it's something that I think I'm going to try when I move and when I start to meet new people, is introduce myself with they, them, theirs pronouns, but still also use she, her, hers.
Yeah.
I feel like if people, so for me, it's not as, I don't think it's as personal for me as it is for some other people. Yeah. And so for me, it's about an agreement and about an understanding within my friends and family and myself. And so if my friends and family are like attached to she, her, hers, or that's what I don't mind that.
Yeah.
I can't imagine, I mean, my mom, I think, would eventually want to do what felt most comfortable for me, but I think initially might have an issue using those new pronouns. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with taking time. I'm okay with kind of feeling it out. I think it's a process for everyone. Not everyone feels that way, and that's totally valid. Like, if somebody tells you my pronouns are he, him, his, or they, them, theirs, you need to respect that.
Yeah.
You know,
and not ask questions and just do it.
Yeah. And it, you know, personally, I don't care if it's hard. You know, I don't care if it's not proper English.
Right.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
When's the last time, you know, like, it's not like we're all sitting for the GRE tomorrow. Like, we don't need, you use improper English all the time, I'm sure. Like, that's, your argument is not valid. The person's pronouns are valid, the person's feelings are valid, the person's emotions are valid, and you need to respect that. And so, I think it's different for every individual, right? And I have a very unique perspective, just like everyone else does. And mine, I think, is kind of rooted in privilege, and that I have been accepted every step of the way. Like, my family has been super supportive, and my friends have been supportive, and no one that's close to me has given me any kind of pushback on my identity. Whereas you have other people whose families are like, no, 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 no. Of course they're going to be like, these are my pronouns, it's non-negotiable. You know, they need to feel that support, and the way that they do that, you know, and I'm kind of assuming here, but is by, you know, saying, this is who I am and you need to respect that. And I get that. I support that fully.
So for people who are kind of new, and I think this has happened to a lot of people, it's happened to myself, where you're in public, and let's say you're at Starbucks, okay, and there's someone there that you don't know if they are a he or a she or a they. It's like, what do you suggest to people in general, like, to deal with that if they're not sure, or if they're dealing with someone in customer service and you're just like, and you want to be respectful and say sir, ma'am, or whatever, what is your advice?
I think there's different levels, and I say I live in a dream world, and and my dream world is we don't say sir, we don't say ma'am anymore. And I know that's hard, especially for Southerners, but again, I don't really care. Yeah. We need to get out of this world where we gender our language. And because no matter what someone looks like, whether they look like me or they look like you, you still don't know what pronouns we use. Like, I might be the more confusing one. You might be like, oh, that person's queer.
Yeah.
And But for all we know,
so
we
don't assume.
Don't assume.
Yeah.
So if you're talking about someone, right, I always say it's safe to say, because we're all talking about people all the time.
Yeah.
I use they.
They.
And,
yeah.
And that goes for someone that looks like you, and that goes for someone that looks like me, because I try not to gender people unless they tell me their pronouns. And so if it's someone that I'm interacting with, the way I train people is, if you're interacting with someone, there's an opportunity where you introduce yourself, right? And you say, hey, I'm Kat. I use she, her, hers pronouns. And that opens up the door for them to then say, hey, I'm Molly, and I also use she, her, hers pronouns.
Okay.
If you don't do that and you just say, what pronouns do you use? Well, who do you ask that to?
Yeah.
You got to ask it to everyone, which is fine. You can ask somebody, what pronouns do you use? But what if you have someone that looks like me and looks like you standing next to each other, and that person asks me, what pronouns do you use? And then turns to you and says she, her, hers.
It's assuming.
Well, it singles me out.
Right.
One, it outs me, you know.
That's a good point that I've never thought about.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people don't, because they're like, well, if I don't know. And I'm like, well, you never know until someone's told you.
Yeah.
And so it's that getting over that assumption that just by the way someone looks, I can tell that they may not use the assumed pronouns.
So ultimately, just to make sure you're not offending anyone or taking them down a path emotionally, that's just hard. It's safe to use the name that's on their name tag, I would say, if you're at, a store, or just have a conversation and take out the ma'am and sir and just...
Yeah. Somebody asked me the other day in one of our trainings, they were like, what is there a general thing I can say instead of yes ma'am or yes sir? And I was like, I wish there was. Because I like to be respectful too, and I know that, but we really have to remove that from our language. And so something that I've started saying, and it's just me, and it's not gendered, but it's yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it kind of gives you that extra push.
Okay.
Because when we're saying yes ma'am or sir, it's like, I'm being respectful. I'm telling you yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, sir. And so that's something that I say to my boss. Yes, absolutely. Now with him, I know he uses he, him, his pronouns. I can also say yes, sir.
Yeah, because
But to train myself to not do that to just anybody, whose pronouns I may not know, I'll say yes, absolutely. And
that's good to know.
Yeah.
And maybe people that are watching, you can practice that today.
I always encourage people to practice. Practice using they, them, theirs pronouns.
Yeah.
Practice not gendering your language. Practice intentionally gendering your language. So if you know someone's gender, if you know someone's gender pronouns, then when you're gendering them in your language, be aware of it, right?
Yeah.
That way that when you don't know someone's gender pronouns, you're also aware of that.
Yeah. That's good. And I was filling out an application the other day, or paperwork, and it says gender on there, and it says male or female. And then I remember I can't remember, and I wish I could remember what company it was, but they did have male, female, or non-binary or whatever. And I was like, good for them.
Yeah.
And so I wonder when it's going to be a thing where there are more companies or more people that are putting that on stuff, or just taking it off completely, because why does it matter?
Right. That we're a long way away from that.
Yes.
And I did my internship at Big Brothers Big Sisters, which is inherently gendered, right?
Yeah.
It's in the name.
Yeah.
And it's inherently binary. It's in the name. And part of my job there was to change our paperwork and to change that. And now it's depending on what you're filling out and what system you're on, but it's either gender with a line, so you can just write in.
Also a good option.
Yeah, or it's gender and then a drop down with 10 choices.
Yeah. Which is so crazy to think, let's say 10 years ago, did you think that there were 10 options for gender?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah. And it just shows that we're growing as a society, and hopefully it will get better. And I think there's always going to be those people out there that just choose not to be open-minded, or choose to just be like, no.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate, but I'm hoping that with you talking about it, it educates people out there in the social media world, and just encourages them to practice that, because you don't know what people are going through. You don't know if they are she, he, them, their, you don't classify them. just treat everyone with the same respect as you would, and just, you know, and don't think too much into it.
Yeah, and I think you'll find that as you change your language and change your mindset, that people are like, oh, well, I don't interact with that population.
Yeah.
But you just don't know.
You don't know.
You do, and you don't know.
It's people everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think that it's really awesome that you were so open about talking about it, and I really, really appreciate it. Is there any advice, mental health wise, like if someone is struggling with all the things that we've talked about today, that you would like to put out there?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, for me, my passion is LGBT youth. The Trevor Project is a great resource. They have a suicide hotline online. I think you can even text in. You know, also just, I know it's fucking scary. It took me 25 years to ask for the help that I needed. There were probably 15 years of my life where I didn't live a day of it without suicidal thoughts. And, you know, now they're few and far between. So it's terrifying to take that first step to get help, but just do it, because it matters, and it's normal. Like, everyone's struggling. More people than you know have mental health struggles. And, you know, I think we have to normalize it, and we have to talk about it, because if we don't, then we're going to continue to see the high rates of suicide that we do.
Yeah, no, I think it's amazing. You're amazing.
So are you.
Well, thank you guys. If you have any questions, Kat is super open. Feel free to message her.
Totally. Yeah.
If you need the resources, if you just have questions about her personal experience or need help in any way. And of course, I'm always open to chat if you're dealing with any mental health and you want to talk about it, because believe it or not, you know, being open about it, it really does help. I know it's helped me. So thank you guys for watching, and peace out.
Bye.